Let me tell you something people don't like to admit. Silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence means somebody is fighting a battle inside their own mind. See, when a man goes quiet, everybody assumes he moved on. They think because he stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped showing up, that his heart packed its bags and left too. But that's not always the truth. A man can be silent and still thinking about you every single day. Men are wired differently. When we're hurt, when we feel exposed, when our pride takes a hit, we don't always speak. We retreat. We shut down. Not because we don't care, but because caring too much scares us. Silence becomes a shield. It's easier to say nothing than to admit you still have power over me. See, obsession doesn't always look like chasing. Sometimes it looks like watching from a distance. Checking your social media and pretending it was an accident. Asking about you through mutual friends. Comparing every new woman to you and finding something missing every time. That quiet man, he's replaying conversations in his head, wondering where it went wrong, wondering if you ever think about him the way he thinks about you. Silence has a way of confusing people, especially when emotions are involved. When someone you once shared a deep connection with suddenly goes quiet, the first thought that enters your mind is that they have moved on, that their feelings disappeared the moment the words stopped. But life does not work that way, and neither does the human heart. Silence is not always the end of a story. Sometimes it is the pause between two thoughts, the space where emotions hide because they are too heavy to speak out loud. A man can be silent and still be thinking about you constantly. He can wake up with your name in his head and go to sleep replaying memories he pretends not to care about. Men are often taught not to express vulnerability, not to admit when something or someone still affects them. So instead of saying, "I miss you," or "I didn't know how to handle losing you," they choose quiet. Silence becomes a place to hide their confusion, their regret, and their feelings that never really went away. What most people misunderstand is that obsession does not always look like chasing. It does not always show up as phone calls, messages, or dramatic gestures. Sometimes obsession looks like distance. It looks like someone watching your life from the shadows, checking your social media and pretending it means nothing, asking about you through others while acting unbothered to your face. He notices when you post less, when you smile more, when someone new appears in your life. He tells himself he does not care, but his actions betray his thoughts. There are moments when silence is louder than words. In that quiet space, a man relives conversations, replays arguments, and wonders what he could have done differently. He remembers the way you laughed, the way you listened, the way you made him feel understood. Those memories do not disappear just because he stopped talking. They stay with him, especially when life slows down and there is nothing left to distract him from his own thoughts. But silence is also tied closely to pride. For many men, pride is a wall that is difficult to climb over. Admitting that you still matter, that you still have power over his emotions, feels like losing control. So he chooses to say nothing. He convinces himself that staying quiet is safer than risking rejection, safer than exposing wounds he never learned how to heal. Silence becomes his way of holding on without having to explain himself. Yet, it is important to understand that while his silence may be rooted in obsession or unresolved feelings, it is still his responsibility to communicate. You cannot build clarity from guesswork. You cannot create peace by constantly analyzing someone else's behavior. If a man truly knows your value and is ready to love you the right way, he will find the courage to speak, even if his voice shakes while doing it. There is a danger in romanticizing silence. When you start believing that quiet automatically means deep feelings, you may end up waiting for someone who is not ready to show up for you. Silence can mean longing, but it can also mean fear, emotional immaturity, or confusion. And while all of those emotions are human, they do not excuse leaving someone else in uncertainty. Sometimes silence is not meant to be decoded. Sometimes it is meant to be accepted for what it is. a pause that tells you more about the other person than it ever could about you. You should never feel the need to chase answers from someone who chooses not to give them. Your worth does not decrease because someone else lacks the courage to express how they feel. If he is still obsessed, truly obsessed, his silence will not last forever. Feelings demand expression. Sooner or later, they find a way out, whether through words, actions, or regret. And if that moment never comes, then his silence becomes your clarity. It shows you what he was capable of offering and what he was not. Your peace is more important than someone else's unspoken emotions. Growth comes when you stop listening to what silence might mean and start paying attention to how it makes you feel. You deserve communication, consistency, and honesty. Anyone who truly values you will not risk losing you just to protect their ego. Silence can hide obsession, but it can never replace love. And love, real love, does not leave you guessing in the quiet. Silence can be one of the most misleading behaviors in any emotional connection. When someone who once spoke to you daily suddenly disappears into quiet, the mind immediately begins to fill in the gaps. You assume the feelings are gone, that the attachment faded, that you no longer cross his mind. But silence is not always the absence of emotion. In many cases, it is the presence of too much emotion with nowhere to go. A man can be quiet and still feel deeply, still struggle with thoughts of you that refuse to leave him alone. Men often process emotions internally. Where some people talk through pain, men tend to withdraw into it. Silence becomes a private space where they try to regain control over feelings that make them uncomfortable. Missing someone means admitting vulnerability, and vulnerability is something many men were never taught how to handle. So instead of reaching out, they pull back. Instead of speaking, they think. Instead of acting, they wait. That waiting, however, does not mean forgetting. Obsession does not always look intense on the surface. It can be subtle, hidden beneath routine and distraction. He may go on with his day, show up to work, laugh with friends, and appear completely fine, yet still feel a pull toward you that he cannot explain. He might tell himself he made the right choice by staying silent, but late at night, when the world slows down, your memory becomes louder. Silence gives those thoughts room to grow. A man who is still emotionally attached will often keep watch from a distance. He may not speak to you, but he notices changes. He senses shifts in your energy. He wonders who now occupies the space he once held. He compares every new interaction to what he shared with you, even if he never admits it out loud. This kind of fixation can exist quietly, fueled by regret, curiosity, and unresolved feelings. Pride plays a powerful role in this silence. For many men, pride is deeply tied to identity. Reaching out feels like surrender. Apologizing feels like admitting failure. Expressing longing feels like losing power. So he chooses silence, believing it protects him. What he does not always realize is that silence also keeps him stuck, trapped in his own thoughts without resolution. It is easy to mistake this quiet obsession for something romantic, but there is a hard truth that must be faced. Feelings that are never communicated cannot build anything real. Love that stays silent cannot grow. While his silence may mean he still cares, it also shows his limitations. Emotional connection requires courage, and silence is often the result of fear rather than strength. There are moments when silence speaks volumes, but it should never become a language you are forced to translate every day. Constantly analyzing someone else's behavior drains your energy and distracts you from your own growth. You are not meant to wait in uncertainty, hoping someone will finally find the words they have been withholding. Sometimes silence is less about obsession and more about avoidance. Avoidance of accountability, avoidance of emotional responsibility, avoidance of the work required to maintain a connection. And no matter how strong the feelings may be, avoidance will always block progress. A man can care deeply and still choose the easier path of doing nothing. When you stop responding to silence with curiosity and start responding with self-respect, everything changes. You begin to understand that your value is not measured by someone else's inability to speak. You recognize that consistency matters more than hidden emotions. Peace matters more than unanswered questions. If he is truly consumed by thoughts of you, eventually silence will become unbearable. Emotions seek release. They surface through words, actions, or confessions that can no longer be held back. But if time passes and silence remains, then it reveals a deeper truth about what he was willing or unwilling to offer. You deserve clarity, not confusion. You deserve presence, not distance. Silence may hide obsession, but it also reveals character. And character, more than emotion, determines whether someone belongs in your life. Silence has a way of making people doubt themselves. When someone who once knew your voice, your habits, your moods, suddenly stops speaking, the quiet feels personal. You start questioning your worth, your actions, and the meaning of everything that came before. But silence is not always a reflection of you. Often, it is a reflection of what the other person does not know how to handle within themselves. A man can go quiet not because he stopped feeling, but because those feelings became too heavy to manage. Many men were never taught how to sit with emotional discomfort. When something touches them deeply, they don't always lean in, they pull away. Silence becomes a coping mechanism. It gives them time to think, to rationalize, to regain control over emotions that feel overwhelming. In that quiet, thoughts of you can become constant. He remembers small details he once took for granted. He replays moments where he felt understood, valued, and connected. Those memories do not fade just because communication stops. Obsession does not always show itself in obvious ways. It can exist quietly, hidden behind distance and routine. He may convince himself that silence is strength, that staying away proves he is in control. Yet control is an illusion when the mind keeps returning to the same person. He notices your absence more than he admits. He feels it when something reminds him of you, when a song plays, when a familiar place triggers a memory. Silence does not erase attachment, it often intensifies it. There is also fear beneath that quiet. Fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of exposing vulnerability. Reaching out means risking disappointment or hearing a truth he is not ready to face. Silence allows him to avoid that risk, even if it costs him peace. Pride reinforces this behavior. Admitting he still cares feels like admitting weakness, so he chooses distance instead. From the outside, silence can look like indifference, but inside it can be restless. A man can appear calm while internally struggling with regret and unanswered questions. He wonders what you are doing, whether you still think of him, whether someone else has taken his place. That curiosity lingers, even if he never acts on it. Silence becomes a way to stay connected without commitment. But it is important to recognize the limits of silent attachment. Feelings that remain unspoken do not protect a relationship. They prevent it from evolving. Love requires communication, accountability, and action. Silence, no matter how emotionally charged, cannot replace those things. Waiting for someone to speak when they consistently choose not to can slowly erode your sense of security. You are not meant to live in a state of uncertainty, trying to interpret pauses and absences. Someone who truly values you will not leave you guessing. Silence may mean he is still obsessed, but it also reveals his inability to show up when it matters. That distinction is important. Sometimes the quiet serves a purpose. It creates distance so you can see more clearly. It removes distractions and forces you to focus on yourself rather than someone else's internal struggle. In that space, you begin to understand that your peace should not depend on someone else finding their voice. If his feelings are strong enough, silence will eventually break. Emotions demand expression. But if it never does, then the quiet becomes an answer in itself. Not an answer about your worth, but about his readiness. Silence can hide obsession, but it cannot sustain a healthy connection. Silence can feel heavier than words, especially when it comes from someone who once made you feel seen and understood. When communication stops, the mind starts creating stories to explain the absence. You wonder if he forgot you, replaced you, or simply stopped caring. But silence does not always mean the feelings are gone. Often, it means they are buried beneath fear, pride, and confusion. A man can choose silence even while his thoughts are still wrapped around you. For many men, emotional attachment is difficult to navigate. When feelings grow intense, they don't always know how to respond. Instead of expressing vulnerability, they withdraw. Silence gives them space to avoid emotions they don't know how to manage. In that space, you can occupy more of his thoughts than he would ever admit. He remembers moments that felt safe, moments where he could be himself, moments that now feel distant but meaningful. Obsession does not always look dramatic. It can exist quietly, woven into daily routines. He may not reach out, but he notices when something reminds him of you. A phrase you used, a habit you had, a shared memory tied to a place or song. Silence allows those thoughts to linger without challenge. The absence of communication does not stop the emotional connection from existing in his mind. Pride often strengthens this silence. Reaching out feels like surrendering control. Admitting that you still matter feels risky. Silence becomes a way to protect his ego, even if it costs him emotional clarity. He may believe that staying quiet keeps him safe from rejection or disappointment, but it also keeps him trapped in unresolved feelings. From your perspective, silence can feel confusing and painful. You may replay interactions, searching for answers. But silence is not something you are meant to solve. It reflects his inner conflict, not your value. You cannot fix what someone refuses to face. Waiting for words that never come can slowly drain your energy and peace. It is easy to romanticize silence, to believe it means depth or intensity. But silence can also be a sign of emotional limitation. Caring without acting, feeling without communicating, creates stagnation. Love requires more than unspoken thoughts. It requires presence, honesty, and courage. Sometimes silence exists because a man does not know what he wants. He may be torn between attachment and fear, between longing and self-protection. Silence allows him to avoid making a decision. Yet avoidance does not stop time from moving forward. While he remains quiet, life continues and you grow. The quiet can become a mirror. It reflects what he is capable of offering and what he is not. If his feelings are strong enough, silence will eventually feel unbearable, pushing him to speak or act. If it does not, then the quiet itself becomes clarity. You deserve more than hidden emotions and unanswered questions. Silence may hide obsession, but it cannot build trust or security. Understanding this allows you to release the need to interpret the quiet and instead focus on what truly brings you peace. Silence can feel like abandonment when it comes from someone who once made you feel important. The sudden absence of words leaves a space that the mind desperately tries to fill. You replay memories, reread old conversations, and search for meaning in what is no longer being said. But silence is rarely simple. It is often layered with emotions that were never processed, feelings that were never expressed, and thoughts that remain unresolved. A man can stop speaking while still carrying you with him in ways he does not fully understand. Many men struggle with emotional expression. When connection becomes intense, they may feel exposed. Instead of leaning into that vulnerability, they step back. Silence becomes a shield, protecting them from emotions they fear losing control over. In that quiet, thoughts of you can grow stronger. He may remember how you made him feel accepted, how you listened, how you brought a sense of calm or excitement into his life. These memories linger, especially when he is alone. Obsession does not always look like effort. It can exist without action. He may not call or message, but he notices when your presence is missing. He wonders how you are, what you are doing, and whether you still think about him. He may compare others to you, even if he never admits it. Silence allows him to hold onto these thoughts without risking rejection or confrontation. Pride often plays a role in maintaining distance. Reaching out would require him to admit that he still cares, that he may have made mistakes, or that he feels vulnerable. Silence feels safer than honesty, yet safety comes at a cost. Unspoken emotions do not disappear. They settle into restlessness and regret. The quiet becomes a place where feelings remain trapped. From your side, silence can feel confusing and unfair. You may question what you did wrong or what changed. But silence is not a puzzle you are meant to solve. It is a reflection of his emotional limits, not your worth. Waiting for someone to find the courage to speak can slowly erode your confidence and peace. There is a temptation to believe that silence equals depth, that if he is quiet, he must be feeling something profound. While that can be true, it can also be misleading. Silence can just as easily mean avoidance, fear of responsibility, or emotional immaturity. Feeling something and acting on it are not the same. Love that stays hidden cannot grow or evolve. Sometimes silence persists because a man is unsure of what he wants. He may feel attached but not ready, interested but afraid. Silence allows him to avoid making a decision. Yet avoidance does not stop the passage of time. Life continues and opportunities for connection pass by. The longer the silence lasts, the clearer the message becomes. Either he will eventually speak, driven by emotions he can no longer contain, or the quiet will remain, revealing what he is unwilling to offer. In either case, the silence provides information. You deserve clarity, presence, and emotional honesty. Silence may hide obsession, but it cannot replace communication. Recognizing this helps you let go of the need to interpret the quiet and focus instead on protecting your peace and valuing yourself. Silence can feel like the most powerful response a person gives, especially when it comes from someone who once shared closeness with you. When words disappear, the quiet can feel intentional, almost as if it is sending a message you are supposed to understand. You begin to wonder whether the silence means indifference or whether it hides something deeper. The truth is, silence often carries emotions that were never resolved. A man can stop speaking while his thoughts remain deeply attached, circling back to you again and again. Many men were taught to suppress emotion rather than express it. When a connection affects them deeply, they may feel overwhelmed and unsure of how to respond. Silence becomes a way to regain control. It allows them to think without having to explain themselves. In that quiet, your presence can feel even stronger. He may remember conversations where he felt understood, moments where he felt seen in ways he did not expect. Those memories do not fade easily. Obsession does not always announce itself. It can be quiet, hidden behind routine and distance. He may not reach out, but he notices your absence in subtle ways. He wonders how you are doing, whether you still care, whether someone else now holds your attention. Silence gives him room to observe without engaging, to remain connected without vulnerability. Fear plays a significant role in this behavior. Reaching out would mean risking rejection or confronting emotions he is not ready to face. Silence feels safer than honesty. Pride reinforces this choice, convincing him that staying quiet protects his dignity. Yet that protection often comes at the cost of peace. Unspoken emotions have a way of resurfacing as regret or restlessness. From your perspective, silence can be exhausting. It leaves too much room for interpretation and doubt. You may replay interactions, searching for answers that never come. But silence is not something you are meant to decode. It reflects his inner conflict, not your value. You cannot force someone to communicate when they choose not to. There is a danger in romanticizing silence. It can feel meaningful, as though it must hide strong emotion. While that can sometimes be true, silence can also signal emotional avoidance. Caring without acting, feeling without communicating, creates distance rather than connection. Love requires courage, and silence often reveals the absence of that courage. Sometimes silence persists because a man is unsure of what he wants. He may feel attached but not committed, interested but afraid. Silence allows him to avoid making a choice. Yet avoidance does not stop time. Life moves forward, and people grow. If his feelings are strong enough, silence will eventually break. Emotions demand expression. But if the quiet continues, it becomes an answer of its own. Not an answer about your worth, but about his readiness and ability to show up. Understanding this allows you to release the need to analyze the silence. You can begin to value clarity over curiosity and peace over speculation. Silence may hide obsession, but it cannot build the emotional security you deserve.